And so the municipal corporation would be the best bet for where they would get the chance to vet all that is necessary in that instance. So I ask the committee in session if we could have a consensus to hear the situation as today being the last here, and ask that they take up the matter with the municipal corporation, because that's where the answers are going to come from.
Chairman, you had mentioned it before, but the Charlemont situation is multifaceted. There is the element related to the road itself and the works which were done to deal with the sewage. That's one element which would cover NWC and NWA. But the broader issue of Charlemont relates, and in fact, the road matter relates to the number of developments that took place and are taking place on that particular road and the impact that it has had on the neighborhood. So I don't think all of those issues are necessarily KSAC issues. Some of them are, but for example, some of them would be NEPA in terms of approvals for these developments and municipal and so KSAC definitely has a role, but I don't think it is solely matters related to KSAC. I think it is broader than that.
But remember, if I'm supposed to go back to the act that governs the municipal corporation across the country, they are the custodians of all the entities, so to speak, and therefore anything that happens within a parish, the municipal corporation has the last say. I know that NEPA is really a referral, so to speak. They will make reference to a situation, and the municipal corporation will accept. Recommendations are made by this entity as to how things should be, and it is upon the municipal corporation whether to accept the recommendations or not. And for that matter, I am saying that all planning, all building infrastructural development has a place at the local authority, which is the municipal corporation in this matter. That is my take on it.
So if I'm to understand you, that all the matters that have been referred to by the submission from the citizens' rights to the city group, you're saying to refer all of that to
the municipal corporation, because the road in essence is a local road and not an NWA road. One, two. Even if it is.
No, I understand that, and let me finish. Let me finish, though, Chairman. Sorry. I would not agree with referring, because if you're to read their submission, even though the matter of Charlemont was an original concern, they are speaking generally about Kingston and St. Andrew and the proliferation of construction taking place. And I think as a committee itself, the standing orders allowed them the right to write to the committee for them to make a submission and for us to at least deliberate on the concerns as elected representatives and a part of the committee. And I think before referring the matter as a whole to the KSAC, that we at least give it some hearing, because a report has been written by the NEPA, report has been given by the Ministry of Local Government in dealing with not only that matter, but in dealing with the density matter overall, which has been a national concern, especially in the KSA in Kingston and St. Andrew. So if it was the matter of the reinstatement of the road, then I would say that is one matter, then that should be referred to the KSAC or KSAMC. But to deal with the general matter on density within the Kingston metropolitan area, I think we should not just broad brush and send it over to the KSAMSC, but at least have a discussion within the committee on that general matter would be my recommendation to you.
Once again, member, I agree with what you are saying. And the part that I'm adding to or alluding to is the fact that even though it's spread across other entities, all the matters that are going to be addressed by the entities are of the St. Andrew and Kingston Corporation. Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation. So it becomes a local matter, so to speak. If we are speaking about building codes for the nation, for the country, then I would accept the fact that this is where we discuss the matter, because it would supersede any one corporation. The fact that it is only dealing with Kingston and St. Andrew and not Portland or St. Thomas, then I find it necessary that we would send it to where it truly belongs. And all the entities, NEPA, NWA, NWC, all of them would report on the matter when it is up for discussion at the municipal corporation, because that's where it really ought to be.
Chairman, I respectfully disagree, because I don't know if you're sending it to KSAC, I'm not sure what you're going to get, because KSAC doesn't have any mechanism to hear the complaints of the residents. In fact, many of them wrote to KSAC because of issues dealing with breaches. They have been dissatisfied. Some have had to take court action to get some of the same regulations enforced. So I don't know what we would accomplish by sending it to KSAC. And again, it's the multiplicity of issues around Charlemont. Charlemont is simply an example of a wider problem. Yes, it is in the corporate area, because the corporate area is the area where there's most concentration of the construction. But the issues have broader national implications, and I don't see how sending it to KSAC will resolve it at all.
But also, I just want to refer the chairman to section 73CC of the standing orders, dealing with the economy and production, human resource and social development, and infrastructure and physical development committees, where it says the committee can receive submissions from citizens and organizing meetings between citizens, community groups, sectoral organizations, members of parliament, and representatives of government agencies to facilitate exchange of views on the operations of the government and their effect on the communities, not national, the communities and groups in the society. So I think we are running ahead of ourselves in pushing it to the agency without going through, because the standing orders allow the community group to write to the committee, hence why we have invited them. But I think that, Chairman, the matter, even though dealing with the KSAC, and it may not have a national, it does have a national implication, yes, in itself, but there are citizens within the KSAC, within the Kingston and St. Andrew area, that have an issue in dealing with developmental orders and dealing with developments within their communities, that I think that the committee has a right to hear them and not just send it off to the agency.
Some member, the reason why we are discussing the matter is that we had invited them at first, which we gave them the right to, as it is mentioned in 73C, subsection C, subsection C. Mm-hmm. So we had give them a hearing. All I'm simply saying, now that we have given them the hearing, the findings, my opinion is that, okay, it needs to be in-depth discussed. And so the ambit of the municipal corporation is where we put it, because Member Robinson mentioned that he don't think that the MC has the tenacity, so to speak.
I'm just asking, what is the mechanism? You say you want to refer it to the KSAC. When it is referred there, what will happen?
It is now for the MC to look at the building plan, because that's where a building plan goes. A building plan for a construction goes to the MC to be vetted and given approval.
But the issues are not just about the building plans and the
I agree with you. It surrounds
development orders.
It surrounds building.
Correct. But for
Fine.
example,
And I'm saying to you that because it is happening directly in a particular MC, we're asking that the particular MC deals with the matter. Because where we are now, I agree that what is happening in Charlemont Drive has a situation that somebody in Westmoreland can say, I am seeing the same thing there. But unless we're bringing a national issue for legislation and policy making, then I still believe that it goes to the local authority, which is Kingston and St. Andrew. That's all I'm saying. So they are here with us today. We will hear what they're saying, and we will say to them that further on to it, we are going to ask them the matter.
I would wait until we hear what has to be said before you make that decision. But
that's what I'm saying to you.
Yeah. So
that's what I'm saying.
Because a big part of the problem.
Either way, there's nothing we can. The building plan for what is happening does not come to Parliament.
No, but Mr. Chairman, we are the ones who set the laws. We are the ones who set the laws.
But
that's
remember,
the first thing. Remember, we are the ones who set the laws.
Are you saying that you're going to...
No, but it is from this committee that the report goes to the full House in discussing the concerns of the citizens who elect us to be here. So to say that we're going to be sending it off, because there can be probably a greater issue that comes out of this committee meeting than just that of the Charlemont residents. So let us hear what has to be said. Let us go through the reports that have been submitted to us. And then we can take a decision after that. I'm not going to say to you that I'm agreeing with you on the front end of this meeting, that we're going to be sending the thing to the KSMAC before I at least hear from those who wrote us this letter and from the agencies who we have sent questions to in dealing with it.
Remember, I am agreeing with you 100% that we are going to take the entities that are here, we are going to listen to the situation, but in going further, because we will not have anything more to do at the end of it, more than to say to the all right, let's...
No, I can't agree with you there. I cannot, because you are prejudging and saying...
So let us ask that the entities come on inside and answer the queries.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will now ask, I think we have at least 3 or 4 entities that are here with us this afternoon, and I will ask that we do introduce ourselves as per the entity that we are from, to start from my immediate left.
Before you go there, Chairman, I'm not sure if anyone from the Citizens' Rights to the City group was invited to the meeting. They're the ones who wrote to the committee. They were invited to the last meeting. Is there a reason why they're not here today?
I suspect that members in the gallery as observers are members of that grouping.
So were they...
Because we would have asked that they be invited as observers to what is happening, and not...
But in the last committee meeting, with all due respect, Chairman, they were able to give their submission. They are the ones who basically wrote...
They came on as a support to the public defender at the time. I'm saying to you that the submission has been made and that we ask them to come now to observe to see that everything goes transparently, because the information that is required that they had requested is before us. It's not a debate we're having with them. They asked for us to assist in the situation, which we have brought the entities here, and so they from the Charlemont group are here to observe the situation to see to it that it is...
Well, let me just state it for the record, Chairman, that, I mean, if the standing orders allow us to invite them to the meeting itself, not as observers, but to participate, I think it would have added value to have them here as a part of this meeting here that we are deliberating on right now. But you have made your ruling.
So we will continue with the introduction, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Gillian Guthrie, Chief Technical Director, acting in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. I have with me today here senior officers of the Ministry and of NEPA and of the National Works Agency, National Water Commission, 2 agencies of the Ministry. So let me introduce them very quickly. There is Mrs. Janet Coleman-Howlett, Senior Director, Works Policy Research and Monitoring. Ms. Talia Gibson, Senior Director, Water Policy and Monitoring. Ms. Monique Gibbs, Senior Director, Strategic Planning, Performance Monitoring, Evaluation and Risk Management from the Ministry. From the National Environment and Planning Agency, Mr. Peter Knight, Chief Executive Officer. Ms. Majourne Warlock, Director, Legal and Enforcement Division. Mr. Gregory Bennett, Director, Applications Management Division. From the National Water Commission, Mr. Mark Barnett, President. And Mr. Garth Jackson, Vice President, Engineering and Capital Projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll hand it over to the agencies when they're ready.
Members, just a matter of housekeeping. I am advised by the clerk that the document from the CRC is not the original, but an addition to.
Chairman, may I proceed? Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members. My name is Robert Hill, Chief Executive Officer of the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation. Along with me is our Director of Planning, Ms. Andreen McLaren, and our Chief Engineering Officer, Mr. Xavier Chavans. And we thank you for the invitation, Chairman.
Chairman, if the member from Southwest St. Catherine was here, he would rule that Mr. Chavans is not properly dressed. But I won't raise it, but you're supposed to wear a tie inside here. But I won't raise it, all right?
So it is not going on record that you raise it. You didn't raise it. Okay, gentle folks, we are here this afternoon because the CRC, Charlemont, I'm trying to find it because I don't want to citizens. So we would have asked the different entities, NEPA, Municipal Corporation, Kingston and St. Andrew Water Commission, and NWA to have responded to some queries that was asked by CRC and to give an update at this meeting. I would ask that Mr. Robert Hill, seeing as you're the Chief Executive Officer of both parishes where development is concerned, that you open the floor with your response to the queries.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. May I be permitted, Chairman, to just ask for clarification? The information, whereas we are prepared to answer to an extent, the information that we were asked for were related to some questions posed by the committee back in late 2021, so much so that it was related to 6 questions, Chairman. I just want to clarify, Chairman, is that the committee's wish and pleasure for us to respond to, or is it specifically dealing with citizens' rights to the city? Because I say, Chairman, we do not have the questions. We weren't provided specific questions from CRC, although we are familiar and would have met with CRC. But the set of questions that I suspect have been circulated, we do not have that set of questions before us, and I do not want to appear before the committee, Chairman, unprepared. What we came prepared to answer or to expound on is that which would have been provided to the Ministry of Local Government back in January 2022, the 6 questions related to system and operational issues. So I just wanted to get that clear, Chairman. We would have some ability, albeit maybe limited in comparison to the other agencies, to respond to questions from CRC, but not in a fulsome manner if we were not prepared from before this, Chairman.
Chairman, if I just could opine, I've looked at the 6 questions, which are broader than the issues related to the citizens' right to the city, but many of them are related in terms of process, approvals, etc. So I think while it is not directly related to it, I believe it impinges on how you deal with some of the issues they have raised. So from my perspective, I do think they should have been sent to you prior, but you have responded to the 6 here.
Yes, member, yes.
From my perspective, I would say let's go through the answers that you have provided here to the 6, okay, and we can have a discussion on those.
Okay, member, thank you.
But that's just my opinion. The chair have to rule on it.
Mr. Hill?
Chairman?
Continue.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So in that case, Chairman, the committee would have been provided with responses through the ministry, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development in relation to a 6-question sheet. Basically, in my summation, Chairman, looking at our approach to operations, the improved approach to operations and systems as it relates to the permitting of building and planning applications. I wanted to state, Chairman, that we have, to the best of our ability, Chairman, and in accordance with the applicable laws and regulations, responded to the questions asked, and I would hope, Chairman, that the responses are sufficient and we are prepared to, in relation to these, have a broader discussion should any further questions be asked of us. But the responses are outlined to each question, Chairman, and we do have the ability to respond should there be any further issues or questions that would naturally be raised in this forum.
Chair, I do have some questions based on the responses here, and I'd start with question 1. And first, for clarification, the 183 developments between January and March, does that represent the total applications that you would have received in that time, or just what you surveyed?
Which is ongoing, but for the period, Member Robinson, this would have been the count for the period January to March.
All right. The 36 that you said didn't have approvals from the KCAC, you said 14 were issued with seized work orders, 13 investigated, 8 special operations. So this would have been prepared in March. Could you give us an update on those 36 in terms of where you are currently with those?
Surely, Chairman, I'd ask our Chief Engineering Officer to provide a more precise update.
Good afternoon, committee. All right, those, based on the period that investigation was done, so what we have done is given a total of all building works within that period. That's what the data was taken from. So these 36 that we had identified that we didn't serve any notice on, we did more research on them. One, to find out sometimes applications are given based on civic address versus the allot address. So we kind of, what we did was to fine tune to see if these 36 fall in within those categories. So we would have narrowed it down, and we'd have served additional notices. Furthermore, what we had done also was some of these buildings were being constructed in so-called volatile areas. So we were looking at to see if we can properly enforce these activities in terms of using the cease-work notice and the notice of irregularity that comes directly after the cease-work notice. So we were awaiting legal advice, because if we should take all these to court, to follow the course and go to court, most of these buildings, one, we were tied up with a lot of legal fees in order to prosecute these persons who are in breaches. And also, what we try to do is to encourage them to try to seek to regularize. But this 36 was narrowed down, and it was updated subsequent to between January and March.
Let me ask, for example, the 14 cease work notices, what is the status of those? Are those developments that have now made an attempt to regularize themselves? Are they fully stopped working? What would be the status of those?
Yes, some of them, approximately 60% of them, made an attempt to regularize, and another 25% would have stopped, and another 25% would have continued.
So for the ones that have continued, which basically mean they have ignored your cease work order, what action has the KCAC taken against those?
We would have reserved a notice and serve a notice of, and would have reserved a cease-work notice, because, Chairman, committee, there's a time between the cease-work notice and the enforcement notice in order for it to have substance. So you have to serve it within 15 days. So what we would have done is to reserve another notice, then do an enforcement notice for compliance.
So how many of those enforcement notices have you done for the ones that started without your permission?
For the one, so the ones that we have, the 13 that we have spoken of, enforcement notice would have been served on those. The others that were in the category in terms of where we didn't issue any notices at the time, I don't have the full data, but most of those would have been served with the enforcement notice. In order for us to have options, if we need to file legal options, we'd have gone through the process of serving the cease-work notice and also the enforcement notice.
What, and the CEO could say this, what is the complement in terms of the legal resources that the KCC has to deal with these matters? Because my impression is that the developers will always have more than you in terms of both financial and people resources, and can flout your cease and desist orders almost flagrantly, knowing that they can match you or outdo you if it goes to a court of law.
Well, member, thankfully we do have what I would suggest is appropriate and solid legal representation, and that has been evidenced in a few cases that we have before the courts now. Albeit I would not necessarily disagree that the propensity or the ability for developers who are in breach, they do have the ability to access legal services, but we also do have very competent legal representation.
How many developers do you currently have before the courts with action initiated by the KCC, separate from what residents may do or individuals may do?
Just a moment, please, member.
Remember, you're complete. Are you finished with your questioning?
Only on query one. Only on query one. I have questions on all the different ones, but just that's query one.
So there's So under the Building Act, member, we have one current case before the courts. Under the Planning Act, where there are planning breaches that we have cited, in other words, at least 10, in other words, they would have been either ignored or have not become compliant within the time of service, as about 10 to 11 that are now before the court for planning breaches. As you can understand and appreciate, both acts are separate acts. So they are filed based on the type of activity and the type of breach that would have been cited.
All right, thank you. That's just for question one, but if we can go to question two on the issue of the requirements and procedures of the relevant actors to convene broad-based community consultations about development plans, applications for permits, and permits approved. And Section 23 of the Act indicates the basis on which you would have a consultation. So I know in a couple of cases where if I take the Local Authority Act, whether the proposed building is likely to have an adverse impact on any interested person or any member of the public, and whether there's an objection to the proposed building work. So my question I would ask is, to what extent has the KSAMC utilized either private or public consultations about these developments that have taken place? How many have you done? Have you done any at all?
Yes, member, we would have, just before COVID would have struck, we would have held about 6 separate consultations, broad-based consultations, not only pertaining to building and planning issues, but also the policies, programs, initiatives that we would have decided to roll out. A lot of the time, however, was taken up with concerns from citizens in relation to building and planning issues, change of character of communities. Discussions were held around the provision development order and what does that mean for particular spaces. So we would have had an average about 6 of them within the confines of the city, as well as far as Red Hills at one point, and Mona as well. I do not have the list before, but I am certain that 6 consultations were held.
All right, this is not just for KSAC, Mr. Knight is here from NEPA. I know there's a requirement in some cases for a developer to inform residents of the nature of what they're doing and for there to be consultations, etc. It's a imperfect process, because I know of a number of cases where there is a consultation that is held, but the way notices are provided, a number of people are excluded or not aware when the meeting is held, may not be a convenient date. So to what extent are those processes guided by either NEPA or KSAC in terms of what a developer has to do to ensure that it qualifies as a proper consultation and not just a tick in the box to say, yes, we met with some people? Or, yes, or a notice which may not be easily visible or transparent. So I'd love a response. It could be from NEPA or KSAC on that.
Thank you, Member. The requirements for the consultation to be held, if I get your question correctly, Member Robinson, it is when a proposed development is to take place in a particular location. That requirement is to be fulfilled by the applicant/developer. What we have started to do is to ensure that that is done, and that, as you rightly put it, it is just not a tick in the box. We have had several situations where we would have had to send back for additional and more precise information as to whether what we term as a satisfactory discussion/consultation would have been held, where the views of the community are properly recorded, not just to state that we had a consultation on X date and 10 people were present. We want to ensure that the persons who were present actually are owners or occupiers or residents in the area, would have signed some sort of thing evidentiary to state that we were part of a discussion on X date at X location, and we either support or object to this development. So those precise user requirements are what we insist on. I just want to go one step further. In relation to CRC, we had...
Generally doesn't work in that way, though.
Member Phillips, I would say to you, that is, yes, the act is no, that is one. But what we are trying to do, given our limited resources, particularly where that is concerned, because we have a responsibility not only to the applicant, but to those affected. And what it's imperfect, admittedly. It doesn't work as best as we would like to, but I believe confidently that we have made some improvements.
Let me just ask a question. What is required of the developer?
Among other things that is required.
Read that public consultation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
A public consultation.
Is it just posting the notice? Is it having a community meeting? Is it notifying those residents in and around the development? What is required of him?
A basic requirement, and it's really dependent on the type of development proposed. Mm-hmm. If it is a single family structure, the notice is the only thing that is required, a public notice which is prominently displayed. And I was using the example just now, that a suggestion from CRC when we had that initial consultation was that the notices themselves, although prescribed, were too small. And we had agreed, Chief Engineer, to ensure that it was large enough that it could be seen and prominently displayed and persons can read, because in fact the notices, we agree, was too small.
The same size as NRC?
It can be. We're not at that size yet, but we have certainly insisted on enlarging this.
And if it is for
multifamily, yes, I was getting back to the answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
If it's a multifamily concern, a broader consultation is required to be held where a notice is served, a series of proposed dates is provided to community members. They can either write in or can attend, and the full display in terms of the plans or rendering thereof is put before the community and a discussion held on it, and that discussion is to be precisely recorded, because if there are objections, those objections must be clearly stated. As a matter of fact, I wanted to just add as well that the consideration for any application, if any objection is raised, that objection is taken to the Building and Town Planning Committee of Council as part of the consideration for either approval or non-approval of an application.
Let me ask you, how many complaints you have gotten from citizens about the non-adherence to this requirement? Because I can tell you, this is observed in the breach. And the issues we are referring to are not, people don't necessarily have issues with single-family homes. It is where you have the multiple structures, where you're converting a single-family home into townhouses and apartments. And certainly I can say for my constituency, it is rare that a consultation is held. And where it is held, there have been a number of issues raised about the lack of appropriate notice, the date, whether you choose a Sunday evening at 2 o'clock or whatever it is. What does the KSAMC do in situations where one is not held or where you get complaints about these things? How do you act?
Mr. Chevans.
Sorry, before you go. One thing I would love, because we are not the only ones that are viewing this meeting, people out in TV land are doing so. And I would like to ask a question for Mr. Hill, just to say how many zoning and what the different zoning that we have. You have commercial, residential, just to make sure that persons are aware and where we are talking about.
Mr. Chairman and Member Robinson, Mr. Chevans will add that response to his answer now.
All right, just to bring clarity to what Mr. Hill was referring to earlier, the responsibility of the developer to hold consultation, those are in specific cases.
Mr. Chevans, if you give us the zone differences, then it will give myself and others the idea. Because remember, I'm from Montego Bay, and I know that different parishes have different zoning laws. So if you can enlighten us on the zoning laws, and then you go into what is being discussed, then we get a better idea what is to expect of the situation as is.
All right, in terms of categories of construction, you have residential, commercial, institutional. Those are the three, and industrial. Those are the 4 broad zones of construction. So we're looking at, I can speak only to the Building Act, but just to bring clarity to what Mr. Hill was referring to earlier in terms of obligations for the developer, those are in specific cases. And according to the Building Act, the local authority may direct the holding of a public or private consultation, namely where a building work is proposed or there's an objection to the proposed building work. We have received numerous objections objections to building work, and based on those objections, we have invited persons to come to the KSAC. So what we are also do, Chairman, is rather than you objecting to a development which you probably don't have a lot of knowledge about, we point them to the Access to Information Act so they can view the file. Upon viewing that file, they can have to say what are their grounds and objections are, and we weigh those objections to see if those objections would have any fall within the scope of the Building Act, and 2, what adverse impact this development might have on the environment.
What frame do they have to submit those objections?
The objections, we have extended the all right, once the objections are 30 days before once we receive an objection, we give an objection 30 days before before we have a consideration, we'll bring it forward for the community for consideration.
What's the average time for the access to information, for them to get the information?
No, once they have, no, I can tell you this. Once they write us to say that they have an objection, we give them that opportunity regardless of the time.
Regardless?
Yes.
Good.
We give them that opportunity.
So let me, just to be clear, the validity of the objection would be determined by the KSAC committee, right?
No. The objections are directed to the chief engineering officer.
Okay, so they come to you because you may have some that are, I would say, serious, some that may be less serious or frivolous. So you would make a determination of the objection and then based on it refer it to the committee for its deliberation?
Yes.
Okay.
Against the act, because chairman and committee members, most of the time these objections are not, do not fall within the scope of the Building Act. These are planning objections. So when we look at the objections, we look at them according to the Building Act, because we issue two permits when we give an approval, both planning and building. But the Chief Engineering Officer, underneath the Building Act 2018, looks at objections under the Building Act.
So, for example, let's take planning, and I don't know if this is NEPA, Mr. Knight. A lot of the objections are probably more planning related based on the nature of the, let's say it is a community that would be primarily residential, primarily with single family homes, but there are a number of applications for conversion to multi-dwelling complexes. So that's not necessarily a building issue, that's a planning issue. So do those objections, when they come to you, are they referred to NEPA? Or which other body would deal with the planning objections?
On? All right. Good evening, good afternoon, members. So the way the current Planning Act is structured, there is no provision for objection to a development.
No, sorry, repeat.
The way the current Planning Act is structured, all right, so for clarity, so that we are on the same page, there's a Building Act, there's a Planning Act. The Building Act, which is 2018, effective 2019, has a provision for objection/consultation. The objections are specific to what is called building works, which is what Mr. Shevans was speaking about. And there's a definition for building works in the Building Act. You don't have that sort of a thing in the Planning Act at present.
Because the Building Act really kicks in when somebody starts, right? Whereas planning is when somebody has made an application. So you're basically saying that if somebody, a resident or group, raises an issue which is non-building related to planning, there is no mechanism to address those complaints?
No. The Building Act kicks in once you intend to do a development that involves building works. The Planning Act is the same thing once you're doing a development because it has planning implications.
I know. No, I'm clear enough, but I'm just asking you.
Under the Act, no, there is no mechanism for that. So usually what happens is that persons will write to us and we will acknowledge it and we will see how best we can address their concerns. But the Act as it is right now has no such provision for that.
Well, Chairman, I must tell you, that's new to me, and it is something that as legislators we have to address because, in essence, that explains why so many of the issues which have been raised, which are, I would say, more planning-related issues, residents feel frustrated because they don't get either a response or an appropriate response to those issues that are raised. And many of them relate to, for example, a planning issue would be something which changes the, what I might call the, not complexion is the wrong word, but character, of a neighborhood. That's a planning issue. So when somebody sees a, let's say, a 5-story building.
Member Robinson, just for clarification, could the KCC clarify for me, is it that one act commences before the other, or do they run simultaneously? Can person choose under which act they would make an objection? You know, if they make an objection and they state that they are making the objection under the Planning Act, does it mean that they can't then, after being advised that there's no room for want of a better word right now, no room for, no provision for a complaint under the Planning Act, can they so be advised to make the objection under the Building Act?
All right. Again, it would have to do with the nature of the complaint that you're making. So as I said earlier, the Building Act has a definition for building works. So let's say you had raised an objection, but in your letter to us, you said you're doing it under the Planning Act. When we go through it, if anything in there matches up with what the definition of building works is, you will be so advised to make that objection under the Building Act to the Chief Engineering Officer, right? And unfortunately, if it was done under the Building Act and it is a planning issue, yes, your initial response may not be what you want, because yes, we're going to tell you that the Planning Act does not allow for objections at this time.
Well, so you're confirming what I've said. Well, you have confirmed my question. And Chairman, I think this has to be a clear recommendation coming out of this committee, that amendments are made to that particular act to facilitate issues being heard, because most of the issues that I hear of, yes, there are a lot of building issues, but it's really planning. We're in a residential neighborhood, a 5-story multi-dwelling apartment complex is going up. It changes the character of the neighborhood, right? Those are the types of issues that people are complaining about. Or we're on a residential street, it moves from residential to primarily being commercial. The character changes. So in essence, what we're hearing is there's no scope for a resident or a community group to raise objections to those issues right now. Huh? No formal scope. Well, that means no scope. I mean, you can raise it informally, or you can use the media, etc., but formally there is no scope. Well, Chairman, that's something we have to take up as legislators, because that's a major deficiency in the Act, very major.
Just to follow up on that question, is there any remedy, though, that you at the KCC would have, if not, or any agency, notwithstanding that there is no provision in the Planning Act?
I guess he's really asking, how are those complaints dealt with? Oh, go ahead.
Right, so...
Be it that they write to NEPA or they write to the municipal council.
In many instances, we will take the complaints and reassess the application, where we need to make contact with the complainants for further and better information. That will be done. As Mr. Shevans also indicated, persons have been directed to use the ATI because, I know you may raise your eyebrows, under the ATI, it is our way of protecting ourselves in terms of not divulging information that we're not legally allowed to divulge. So we go through and make sure that persons, so there's some information that is just public access, right? So for example, we have what is called a register of applications. That's public info.
Sorry, what is in that register? Because the ATI, you can go through it. I don't know how long it will take, but quite frankly, the horse gone through the gate by the time you get the response, right? Yeah, man, in many cases. I don't think it is a process which is immediate. The question I would ask is, what are you allowed to share when an application comes into you right now with a community, a group of interested persons, etc., which doesn't necessarily breach confidentiality on the part of what the developer has sent to you?
So in some essence, you call it just basic data, which is the location, the reference number, the type of application, the broad nature of the type of development. So for example, we would say a residential development, and then the other part of it is that it's a multifamily development. Persons can then use the ATI, we'd set up a meeting, they'd come in, they're allowed to only view the plans. They can't take any photographs of it, they can't get copies of it for proprietary purposes. They can't get copies
Understood.
of it, right?
So for example, as part of that information, would you indicate that XYZ developer is planning to build 10 townhouses and 15 apartments? Is that the type of information that you're sharing, or you're just saying they're planning a development?
It's just the basic, just to say that a development, a residential, a multifamily development will be done here. One of the things I know that through the Building Act, we've been asking persons on the notices to be more specific. So from the jump, even without coming to us to view just the books.
So let me ask you, I understand why you're trying to protect yourself. Is that based on the act or legal advice you have received from the AG's department?
Yes, yes.
It is from legal advice, okay. Give me an idea. I come in, I make a request, you say through the ATI. What is the typical turnaround period for that information to be provided?
May I? Once the information received through our, most times the information goes to the CEO. Once it goes through our registry, the files are within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, so the files are located and a date can be set up for persons to view the file. Not only that, persons viewing the file might not be au fait with some of the terminologies and the drawings and so forth. So you need someone to interpret for so that the complainant would have better interpretations of the drawing. So I would say safely within 2 weeks of the ATI, once those, more so if they are current files. Because sometimes we get ATI for files that have that have already been approved, probably a couple of years or so forth. But once they are current, within 2 years, current within the 2 year ban, they within 14 days, within 2 weeks, the complainant can view those files.
And that, again, just trying to understand that process. So they would physically come to the KSMC, you would, for want of a better word, have a meeting with them where you show, display, give an overview. Is the developer involved in that process at all, or is it just KSAC officials and the individual?
Yes, no, the developer is not a part of that process. So that because as I said, persons will object. I object to this development. So I write them, what are you objecting to? I just don't want this development. I said you need to be specific so I can know what to weigh the objections against what is before me. So I encourage them to, you want to view the file? Fine. Send me the access to information. Once it's sent, we set up a meeting for them to view the file. And if they are not clear on certain terms or with the interpretations of the drawings, someone is there to interpret those drawings for them. And we started to document those meetings because those form part of the information that goes to the committee for consideration.
So what I want to know, so the basic information, Ms. McLaren, that you can share before you get to the access to information, is there something on your website or something that would give a community an idea? Because the problem in most cases is that people don't know until crane come and work start and construction start. And generally, at that stage, people have to go expend personal resources to take out a court order to stop it. All right? And based on what you are saying, you're going to have a difficulty knowing details before you do an ATI request. So, unless you get anecdotal information that is really 15 townhouse and apartment, you're not going to know until you do an ATI request. So the question is, how can we, KSAC, be more proactive in sharing some of that basic information before a complaint is lodged or raised?
Thank you, Member Robinson. I'd like to just respond quickly by saying that all applications are now on the KCMC's website. All building applications.
And what can I see if I go on this website?
What you will see is the detail of the application, save and accept the certain identifiers. It shows the location, the type of application, multifamily, single-family, industrial, commercial, institutional, the location, and it is updated based on the process of the application itself, so it takes it from application to approval. In betwixt that, there are periods where persons can outline their objections, and those objections, as Mr. Sylvans would have said, taken into consideration, properly documented, with or without ATI, depends on the level of the request. But once it is an objection that has some merit that warrants an investigation or further evaluation, it is documented and taken to the Building and Town Planning Committee meeting, which forms part of the determination for the process to be, the application to be approved or denied.
Member Robinson, can we take Member Phillips? Member Phillips wanted to say something, and Member Sibbles.
Just before we move on from the ability to be able to object, citizens being able to object for planning concerns, I just wanted to hear from NEPA, who has overall responsibility for developmental orders, really. Do you get complaints from citizens also, and how is it treated with, if you do, and when you do?
Thank you, Member. Good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon, colleagues. I think, Chairman, what we have been discussing, I think we need to put a context to the discussion. So, before I answer your question, let me just say something about policy and development orders. Kingston and St. Andrew has a 1966 development order. We have prepared a new Kingston and St. Andrew and Pedro Keys development order, and this order was prepared in collaboration with the Town and Country Planning Authority, National Environment and Planning Agency, and the KSAMC, and wait for it, and key stakeholders, to include professional bodies, academia, community organizations, and government entities. Where we are now, the status of so we published a provisional order in 2017. That is, if we had gone through the complete process, the 1966 order would be obsolete. But we published a provisional order in 2017, and we are hopeful that we will be able to confirm the order before the end of this year. But a development order has a number of objectives. And I think, and for your citizens groups who are here listening, I think we need to just state some of these, because we hear the narrative and we are not quite sure, despite efforts, which I'll come to in a little while. But what we try to do with the development orders, first of all, is to transform policy into workable applications. So we want to provide the planning authorities with up-to-date forward planning, visioning, policies and guidelines as to the basis to make sound decisions and planning applications. So I'll come to it in a little while. And there's a philosophy around preparing a development order. We have to bear in mind that we are in a city. And if you live in a city, you're going to see a city develop. And I'm not talking about loosely, I'm talking about orderly development, and that is the purpose of the development order. But you can't live in a city and don't expect to see a city develop. Any city in the world, you look around cities develop around you. You may wish not to be part of the development of the city, and you may want to move further to suburbs. That's fine. But a city is going to develop around you. So the development order allow us to promote increased densities and heights of buildings. And we have identified 19 major growth centers, planning areas in the KSAMC, along with major corridors and nodes for development. And we are allowing higher densities in the main local planning areas, such as downtown New Kingston, Halfway Tree, Constant Spring, Hagley Park, Camp Road, to name a few. But the order also, we want to promote sustainable development, economic growth, and the protection of the environment. We want to provide green space, open space for citizens to enjoy and to also allow for our city to breathe. We want to facilitate urban renewal and revitalize blighted areas. So if you look at the development order, some of the policies are geared to have these blighted areas develop. And we see some of that happening. For example, well, Vinatown is not quite a blighted area, but we see communities taking opportunities and with increased densities and improving. And we want to promote climate change resilient developments and so on. The development order is tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. It is tied to Vision 2030. It is tied to the Jamaica Constitution. It is tied to the Spatial Plan and government policy directives and decisions. Now, in preparing the development order, stakeholder consultation is critical, which is come to your question now, member. And let me put an exception. Persons never seem to remember the consultation that takes place until it affects them. Or, another side of the coin, persons don't participate in the process. You will publish notices, you will do community, and people don't participate, and then they said there was no consultation. So let me make it clear that for the preparation of this development order, as I said, prepared in consultation, collaboration with the KSAMC, prepared in consultation with ministries, departments, and agencies. So the Water Commission, the Works Agency, the Mines and Geology Division, you name them. All the critical key government ministries, agencies, and departments would be part of the process. There are standing discussion meetings at all of these representatives. So the Water Commission, for example, would tell us in its visioning where are the areas projected to be sold throughout the corporate area, over what time. And all of those find themselves as policies in the development order. Sometimes we go a little bit ahead of ourselves, but that's how development is. So the other professional bodies, as I said, academia, community organizations, and let me say it loudly, like Mona Neighborhood Association, the Golden Triangle Neighborhood Association, the New Kingston, I can remember consultation with you and your councillor in the New Kingston Neighborhood Association, Eastwood Park Gardens, Trafalgar Park Neighborhood Association, Ligani Club Group, Charlemont Drive Neighborhood Association, and I think persons are here, and major landowners, for example, the churches. There are churches in the corporate area that hold acres of land, and you want to engage these stakeholders. What are the plans? I'm not going to name any church now, but what are your plans for these lands? I can also tell you that since we have published the provisional order, some of these church groups, organizations have come in to see how they can benefit, how they can develop parcels of their land for national development. And I'm not going to go into the master plan issue and all of that. Now, When we come to the issue of consultation now, members, at the National Environment and Planning Agency, we use a number, the various modalities. Some the case the MC has spoken about already. What we also find is consultation has generated jobs amongst professionals. So we have professional planners and architects and engineers who are involved in this process. We have a basic terms of reference that we prepared. So when there is need for community consultation, persons can just access the broad terms of reference, get into communities, conduct community survey, and sometimes the report. By the way, this is what, before I should say this is what a development order look like. This is what it looks like. This is the provisional, and the confirm order is not going to be much different because it will look just like this with what the additional confirm. So this is what a provisional order look like. So you see, it takes quite a bit of reading with the various policies and guidelines and so on, and the various maps that are carried in the development order. So let me go back to consultation. So community surveys, and we have a number of professionals involved with this, and persons use different modality, random sampling, community sensitization, and so on. Regardless of the method that is used, at NEPA we verify what is submitted in support of a development. So similar for other developments too, not only housing. So we would call back. A percentage of the participants, and we visit the locations randomly to see that in truth you were involved in this in the survey. We also, from time to time, including some that I've gotten calls about today, I can't recall whose constituency that is. Sometimes we drop a letter. So let's say that there's a proposed 5-story development in an area that you'd want persons to know about. We will map a zone of influence, and we'll drop letters in community boxes or leave it at homes. Give persons a chance to participate in the process. So persons may respond. And generally what persons respond to say is that traffic and noise and dust and so on. And these are material issues, but sometimes when we do the evaluation, these may not be matters that will prevent a development from taking place. You're living in a city, you're going to have traffic, and during construction you will have issues. We also, as we say, we do letters in the neighborhood. We do community meetings. And there are occasions under the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act, because that legislation specifically calls for consultation when the application is screened, an environmental impact assessment study is required, then that automatically generates a public meeting. So it's a very involved process that is gone through. What, from my experience, and I can speak on behalf of the agency and the government, is that persons want to be involved, and persons have to put themselves in a position to get involved. You can't just complain at the end of the process. So I would also like to make the point that we have at least 3 commissions of Parliament that have various oversight. The Integrity Commission, the Public Defender, who we have on every occasion when information is required, we have responded, or sometimes the Auditor General's Department. So the process is properly oversighted. In addition to the authorities that we have oversight, we have the Natural Resources Conservation Authority, and we have the Town and Country Planning Authority. These are, if you want to say, boards that are appointed by the Portfolio Minister, and we have regular meetings and discuss issues. And policy, quote-unquote policy, can evolve from the Town and Country Planning Authority too. Because remember why the Town and Country Planning Authority exists. Town and Country Planning Authority exists to make decisions on development. So you could have a development order and the authority could make a decision in the interest of development, in the interest of economic growth and so on, to get development going in any area. So I hope that has kind of answered some of the concerns here.
Well, you haven't answered my question yet.
Well, Mr. Knight,
I have to answer one other thing. I'm advised. No, you asked, or we treat with complaints.
So, Mr. Knight, a number of things you said. First, you say you plan to complete it by the end of the year. Is it calendar year or fiscal year?
Calendar year.
As in December?
Well, we are trying.
Because I know I was copied on some correspondence between an officer from your office and a community-based organization about setting up a date for some consultations and to have some meetings in relation to this, which haven't been finalized yet. So I just want...
Yeah, but that is a separate process.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, all right. Second, hold on, Mikey, hold on. So, two other things. First, since 2017, there's been significant change. And if I speak just of my own constituency, New Kingston, Seymour Lands, etc., to what extent does the development order reflect the changes that have taken place since 2017? That's one. Secondly, I know you had an advisory committee that would have made recommendations in 2019 coming out of the 2017 development order. Have those been included in the upgraded document or the updated document, or is it the same document that would have been originally tabled in 2017?
Thank you, member. First of all, to a large extent, this document, what the developments taking place now, largely are reflected in the provisional development order. We expect that those decisions that were made, and Ms. Marjorie Wallock, who is our Director Legal and Enforcement, can explain the legal intricacies of what the court says or what the AGC says on that matter. So yes, generally it reflects what's taking place. Generally, you asked also about the advisory.
There was an advisory, NEPA advisory group that made recommendations in 2019.
So, yes, you're right. So a subcommittee of the then chairman, based on all the challenges we were facing and the need for development, did establish a subcommittee, let me call it a subcommittee, chaired by the deputy chairman, who is an architect. And we brought together a number of professionals and had a series of meetings taking a comprehensive look at the corporate area and the various local planning areas and nodes and zones as to how the real intensive development could take place. And that was completed, that was discussed at the authorities meeting. We did also advise at the policy level, and those decisions and those decisions of the authority and recommendations are not in the provisional but will be in the confirmed development order. But
they have been taken into consideration.
They have been taken into consideration. Bear in mind though, that, and this is where I'll turn to Ms. Wallock now, there's a legal provision we have to look at, and the advice that we have about the provisional order and the decisions of the TCPA. So, Ms. Wallock.
Before Ms. Wallock comes in, Mr. Knight, I just want to, in your introduction, you framed the conversation in a particular way which I didn't like, and I'm going to be frank with you. You said that there are people who have to recognize they live in a city and that the city going to develop. And let me say this, the people recognize that. But what they want is orderly development. None of us in here would be comfortable or accept in our personal home if next door to us, without notice, a 5-story building go up. None of us here, right? So I don't want the impression to be given that those who are raising issues are a set of miserable old people, my words, who just don't want to see nothing develop. No. Some people want orderly development. They want to ensure that there are, in fact, green spaces. They don't want to see a concrete jungle. They want to ensure that the infrastructure can meet the needs of the development, meaning water, sewage, those things. They want to ensure that they can drive on a road without there being unbearable traffic. That may not be NEPA specifically, but that might be NWA. So there are very legitimate concerns that many of the residents have raised, which are not just about people being difficult, obstinate, and not wanting to see development. So I don't want you to view those objections or the issues being raised within that context.
Remember, I think you're inferring what I didn't imply at all. What I'm
it's
saying.
What you said, no.
No, but but I did. The point you made about orderly development, I also made that point about how the development order is framed, and what we are seeking to do is orderly development in the city. I did say that. We also have to bear in mind the issues that are being raised, and that's a point I made. I'm not criticizing, I'm not saying person must raise it, but let's take them one at a time. Water. There is no water problem in the city. The government spent $5 billion, brought in how many $1 million additional water?
You're going to make Mr. Barnett or Mr. Jackson comment on that?
No, they can't comment on it. They can't comment on it.
But let me just say, and you know, because earlier I wanted to say that we're here because of the concerns with the developmental order, right? And a submission was made by a community group, Citizens' Rights of the City, which is, we have 29 participating communities that has penned this letter to the committee itself. And I think when you, in your introduction, I'm glad the member intervened in the way that he did, because I had the same concern, you know, of that it seems as if persons have no justification to complain. But let me put it from this side. I mean, yes, that there are notices that would have gone out. And I've always said that if the system worked for the populace, then some of the concerns that they have would be unfounded. Yeah? And when a lot of persons don't turn up to some of these meetings because they feel that no matter what their objections may be, that it's just going to fall on their ears. There are some that no matter what concerns they may have, be it that when a construction is taking place, the contractor dropped the material in the roadway, the road is dug up while construction is, and if they object, is a bag of expletives. But I don't think that anyone, including myself, that believe that is against development and against the growth of the city. But in a sense, it is working out that we're putting the cart before the horse too, because in a sense, we're putting up all of these developments. You try to catch up with the sewage while doing it, but the road network is no better, no different. The water is no different. I don't think that any resident on Paddington Terrace, and I can even speak about the community that I live in, had suspected that you would have had 30 or 40 new developments in a short space of time compared to what the development order was talking about growth in the city. And I think we're losing the essence that it is not about the development order. It is about the number of developments within a particular local over a short period of time. I bought my house not to live beside a 5 or a 6-story building. I have 6 townhouses going up next to me. And why we ask about what notice is given, because the notice that was given is as small as this that was pasted on the fence. And then when we try to complain, I'm saying, go to the KSMC. Because when we hear on the jackhammer hitting for nearly 3 months now and we have no recourse, then persons are going to complain. But I don't think any developmental order took into account what is the change in the city right now that we're seeing. That has caused those who have bought their houses as single-family houses to be concerned on the transformation of these communities. And I think that we need to give them a listening ear, because it is not cast in stone. It's not in blood. And we need to give. Is it that we're going to allow X amount in this area and a next X amount in another area? But when you have people, you have 5, 6, 7 back to back to back to back, it is of concern, Mr. Knight. So, to feel that persons are complaining and it is unfounded because there have been consultations is because people don't have faith in the system, why some people don't come to these consultations. It's simple as a lawmaker can say it. Residents just don't have concerns, have faith in the system, that it is working for them. And development order is good. But the way that it is changing the landscape of Kingston and some other communities is not what persons bank for. It's simple as that. So I come back to my question now. Do citizens have any recourse in dealing with planning objections that they have in their community that they see happening?
Yeah, but remember, before that, I have to respond to some of the concerns you raised. Firstly, the development orders are free to the public. They are on our websites and the various policies. And once, if a developer or an investor, an individual comes with a development plan for a location and it complies with the policies and the terms and conditions of the development order, I hear you saying all of these in one area and so on. You have no choice but to consider the applications.
I would believe that in planning, even it is in the developmental
order. But that is what this is. No. This is the planning.
Look here, me never pass high school, so I can't tell you, so me understand what you are talking about. So let me talk it down into mine. In the area, let's use Paddington Terrace as an example, right? If you're
just a minute. We're going to ask the observers in the gallery, please, you're not allowed to video the process. Please. It's my observation.
As part of the planning of the city itself, yeah, to be specific. As part of the planning for the city, even though it may be, it conforms to the developmental order, but then you look at a community and say, okay, because you have what, 100 habitable rooms per acre, or yeah, right? That the infrastructure itself, the sewage might can take it, but the roadway might not be able to take it. I mean, just the transformation of the community itself. Right? At what point does NEPA, then the planning agency, said, well, we can't facilitate any more of this sort of construction? in this area itself because of the transformation that has taken place. And we have X amount of habitable rooms in this area compared to what was there established before. That you say, all right, enough is enough here, let us look at a different area. We will approve in these areas.
I thought I explained that the zone and the nodes and the growth centers and so on, as outlined in development order. If you are living in an area that it falls in one of these development areas or in the development node or zone, the local planning area, you are going to see developments in those areas. I don't know, and I could go back and research, I don't know of a country that provides a development order and then the state is going to say, boy, you can't develop anymore. Too many developments are taking place. So let's put an end to it. We have to apply the policies and the principles and the practices in the development order while we seek sustainable, orderly development. That's a point I'm making. I am not criticizing.
You are approving an NWA not catching up.
No, but remember, let me just respond to that.
Mr. Knight, we have been going back and forth over the same situation. Yes. I take it that at this time, if there is another question, that you would ask a question.
Answer the question.
Well, I just wanted to answer, Mr. Chair. Chairman, let me answer that the developments that are considered has the considered input of a number of government ministries, departments, and agencies. There is a technical review committee.
And that doesn't mean that it is working.
It is working.
So,
it is working.
Yeah?
Now, the question. Well, as I said, member, we never ignore a complaint. And sometimes the scenario that I gave you of dropping off letters in communities and so on is part of our response to responding to complaints. So persons ask different questions, and we try to provide responses to questions. We have many occasions, member, where persons have said we have not responded and they haven't read their emails because we have responded. I mean, that's the dynamic of what is happening. So we try to respond to all the stakeholders. We respond to the media, we respond to the commissions of parliament, and we respond to our policy leaders on these matters. And we have to respond to the Town and Country Planning Authority and the NRCA. So we do respond, and we have gone outside, and as the KSA-MC does also, we have held back development approvals just to have more in-depth consultation. We have established recently, and my colleague CEO joined us from the KSA-MC, there are two communities that had concerns about development. I don't think they are satisfied with the mapping and the explanation that we have. But we have done these things. We don't come out in the media and say, we talk to Peter Knight, or we talk to John, or we talk to... But we do a lot of these things responding to residents.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knight. The member Civil Service, you still have the question.
No, my question was answered, Chair, when Mr. Hill spoke to it earlier. So I'm satisfied with the answer that Mr. Hill gave me subsequently to answering Member Robinson's question. Thank you.
Could I go to question 5 on the response from KSMNC? Could you indicate, CEO, whether...
Sorry, member, and we are going to have a time frame on it. We're not going to go the long distance. We have been doing 1 hour and 39 minutes thus far.
And Chairman, I would say with all due respect, these matters that I'm going through are very important issues. I believe if the committee needs to convene again, it should, but I don't believe I'm wasting anybody's time by going through these things in detail. I represent a constituency where probably more than any of the 63, we have a lot of complaints about these issues. And I believe I have a responsibility to ventilate them here.
I do understand that you have the responsibility to your constituents, but I remember saying to you that these matters can be dealt with at the municipal corporation.
And I fundamentally disagree with you.
And so, member, we're not going to deliberate on one matter for the entire afternoon. So please just get to the point so that the technocrats can answer the question and we move to another question.
Which is what I'm doing. So I'm going to question 5. That's what I said. I'm not staying on the same point. On the issue of responses, because you would appreciate one of the big complaints that residents have said is that they write and there's no acknowledgement, etc. Can you tell me, I know you implemented some changes since January. What is the current process with a complaint when they come by email, letter, etc.? Is every complaint acknowledged? Are people told in an acknowledgement, this is the process, etc.? If you could tell me that.
Thank you, Member Robinson. We have, in fact, established over a period of time a digital complaints register which is located on our website. It gives the complainant the space and the latitude to outline the severity of their complaints. And we would assign, based on the type of complaint, the relevant officers to respond. We can do better, admittedly, because we do take in quite a bit of complaints. It was just only but a few days ago that we had a thorough examination of it and found that there were some inadequacies, admittedly, in terms of our response time. We do respond, but I believe, admittedly, that we can do a little bit better in responding to specific issues. A lot of the complaints are, again, you would have indicated in your own summation. A lot of them relate to planning. A lot of them relate to issues of a legal nature between neighbors that we cannot address. And so we would refer them to take it up in civil court to have that dealt with. The fact is that we have improved our general acceptance, review, and follow-up of many of the complaints. I'd say up to 80% at best. We are, however, challenged by capacity and resources to respond in a timely manner. You will understand and appreciate, Chairman and members, that for a municipality of this size, we only now have 7 or 8 building officers and 4 planning officers. And despite our best efforts to improve and expand these departments, it has proven a Herculean challenge. But we do really want to openly state that our complaints register, particularly as it relates to the use of technology, has far outweighed our paper-based responses, and we have, in fact, improved on this, not to the level that we would like, based on what I would have outlined earlier, but we do acquiesce to, respond to, as best as possible, within the capacity and time frame, complaints that are brought to our attention.
Is the issue of the number of officers, is it a financial issue, meaning you don't have the resources to take on new people, or is it finding qualified people at the salary levels that are available?
It is a mixture. It's a mixture. It's financial, structural, and the quality of talent that we're trying to engage. I mean, we do go through the Services Commission, the Local Government Services Commission, and many attempts have been made to engage professionals, technical professionals at the level of engineers and planners, and similar capacities. But we have not been successful thus far, and I'm speaking within the last 2 years, to improve the lot that we have, certainly in terms of numbers. We do have, I must state for the record, a very dedicated, very qualified, and really committed staff that have done work beyond the call of duty and done as best as they can to manage the capacity that we have. And we have the largest intake of development applications compared to any other local authority. And that, even with the disadvantages that we are faced with, we operate at an efficient level, which is acceptable because, as you can well know, our development processes are monitored by the World Bank, and we have so far come out with above average results, even with this challenge that we are faced with. Member Robinson.
All right. Question 6, and the response you provided gives me a lot of concern. This is the height and density report. And in your response, you said the authority has not been formally issued with the final approved document to be implemented in considering the review of development applications. As such, any recommendation of the reference report would not have been affected by the KCAC. Now, this would have been an advisory committee of NEPA that would have issued the height and density report in 2019. But your response has basically said you can't refer to a document because you haven't received a formal document. So my question would be to NEPA or KCMC, what is the status of that height and density report from 2019 that is referenced here? If you look at question 6, to advise the committee whether the recommendations of the report of the advisory committee of NEPA on heights and densities entitled KSMC Height and Density Report dated the 6th of February 2019 have been effected. And I've noted your response. I just want to know what is the status of the report, because you're saying 3.5 years later you do have an approved document on which to act.
If I may be permitted, Member Robinson, when it comes down to specific, and I can be supported by DOP and Chief Engineer, when it comes down to applications, I'm now speaking before if we are sitting at committee level, at building committee level, we do take in the recommendation, for example, from a civil aviation authority, if it exceeds a certain height, or recommendations coming from NEPA. So I just wanted, as a precursor to Mr. Knight's answer, say that it is not that we are not devoid of information as relates to specific applications coming in. However, we did not have the final report now to refer to without having to pull on a technocrat from civil aviation or from NEPA to specifically advise us on a specific application related to height if that issue had come up before the committee.
I mean, height is one. Densities, I think, are probably the more problematic of the two. I know there are a couple of applications that you have approved for heights which are going to be probably the tallest buildings in Jamaica. But the issues that tend to come up more regularly are the density ones. So I don't know if Mr. Knight can answer the question about this report.
Yeah, member, I think colleague CEO has reflected quite well, but I think he may have, he should recall that the report and the findings and the recommendations have all been collapsed in the confirmation notice. In fact,
to be clear, you mean in the new development order?
In the confirmation, remember this is the provisional.
Provisional, so
the,
in the confirmed
the
one.
will reflect all of that. And in fact, my colleague, Town Clerk, CEO, the KSAMC wanted even greater densities to some of the areas that and we have said the next round we would look at those. So it's all good, Chairman. We are on the same page, and that is what is in the confirmation notice. So they have been wheeled into the confirmation notice.
All right. So up to when this is confirmed, you said by the end of this year, hopefully, you cannot follow the guidelines in this height and density report, in essence. That's what your written response basically
But that
says.
response was 2021.
No. I'm reading verbatim from what was sent to us by the permanent secretary. Let me read. You have this? You don't have this? It would be good if the CEO could see it.
What I have, Chairman, is basically the question and answer.
Because I think it should be shared with the CEO. This came from, let me read verbatim, not question 6. To advise the committee whether the recommendation of the report of the advisory committee of NEPA on heights and densities entitled KSAMC Height and Density Report dated the 6th of February have been effected. And then this is the answer. The KSAMC has advised that it was requested to comment on the KSAC Height and Density Report dated February 6, 2019. The comments were provided. However, the authority has not been formally issued with the final approved document to be implemented in considering the review of development applications. As such, any recommendations of the reference report would not have been affected by the KSAMC. That's what I read in from. The ministry has also reviewed its files, was not able to identify a formal submission of the approved document for use by any local authority, but will continue to review all files and will further update the committee should any information be located. So basically what I'm asking is, even though you have not received the formal document which will be in the overall development order, are you implementing or are you working with those recommendations?
As well, that is part of why Member Robinson, I would have prefaced my response and also run ahead of CEO Knight by stating that despite the fact that we did not have the reception of the formal documentation, if in any particular case an application is brought before the city engineer and the director of planning with forward submission to building committee, we would have to therefore rely on the specialized recommendation coming from the Civil Aviation Authority and the NEPA as it relates to heights and densities. Other than that, we could not have taken the application to committee without those particular responses or recommendations going forward. So this is the best way we could have assessed an application.
Because you could have been, if you attempted to implement, a developer could challenge you.
We would be challenged because we'd be basically...
You're not operating with a formal order.
Right, sir. Correct, sir.
I have completed my questions on this matter, Sir Chairman.
Are there any other questions by the members? If there is none, so we now move to the agenda items, or the items in the minutes as it relates to the Junction Main Road. In the minutes.
Chairman, I don't know. May I, sir? I'm sorry. Member
Robinson says you have a querying face.
Junction is on the agenda? I don't see Junction.
Oh, so we're taking the minutes. We didn't, remember you started out, but we didn't get through matters. Right. But you had jumped ahead. So I'm just going back to it now.
No follow-up on that one, Chair.
Okay, so we go back. We go back to agenda.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can we be excused? Can we be excused?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Members, any other business? If there is no other business to be discussed, we will look at, we will run robin the next meeting date. And for now, this meeting stands adjourned.
Your government is working for you. On the East Coast, there's a Southern